Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be dedicating this episode to the 7 deadly attacks that took place in Paris on Friday, November the 13th. The whole world condemned the attacks. And here in Egypt, President El-Sisi also condemned the attacks. And we will be talking about this issue and its effect on tourism and the black terrorism that is facing the whole world. And we're glad to be joined by Dr. Ibrahim El-Ghazawi, political commentator and professor of international relations. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Good morning, sir. Sir, a sad incident, and the world leaders are pouring in condemnations to this terrorist act. Your expectations to the ramifications and the repercussions of this incident on the international scene?
Well, let me start with condemning strongly this barbarian attack. And we have to understand that within the larger frame of this massive wave of terrorism attacks that ravage the world today, and there's an exception for that, and that's what I have to say today, and probably I said that several times before, that no country in the world is fully secured from this deadly attacks of terrorism, and we have to understand, as international community, all the members, all the countries, have to absorb this fact and deal with it accordingly with the imperatives of the confrontation, the serious and real confrontation with terrorism. The repercussions, of course, there must be repercussions for that. It's a deadly attack, and it took place in one of the most civilized and stable spots of the world, the Western world especially. Paris is very unique. And the message is so clear that, terrorism does know no borders and no religion and no citizenship or nationalities. The repercussions, of course, there must be negative repercussions for that, starting from reinforcing the security precautions, not only by France, by the way, but by the whole international world, especially European countries and United States and Canada. I'm quite sure that already now there is an undergoing process of reinforcing security precautions, laying more and more controls and restrictions over the movement of particular nationalities in the world, and even adding more and more security precautions and procedures to the check-in process in all the ports in the European and the Western world in general. That will mean simply that there will be more tight handling or treatment to the passengers. Of course, we'll have negative repercussions on tourism. Tourism, to prosper and to develop, needs, freedom of movement. And if you tie or limit the movement in such ways, there will be a lot of...
So do you think this attack will affect tourism in France?
Definitely, not only in France, by the way, in Spain and France, United States and China.
Surrounding.
The whole world, the whole world.
Yes.
Because
the main concern... Do you think it will trigger further racism and discrimination against Muslims and Arabs?
Well, that's one of the expected repercussions.
How do you see the fact that they saw a passport, an Egyptian and Syrian passports? How come the passport remained intact after an explosion like this?
Well, I don't like to jump to conclusions in such issues. It's too early to say a definite word about who has done that and who is responsible, especially this particular issue. This morning, while I was driving to the Thomas Pierre building, I was listening to the news and heard that this Egyptian He was a young man traveling with his mother to
For an operation.
for an operation to his brother. And by the way, he was discovered this morning in one of the hospitals. So he is one of the casualties. So he
Right.
was injured.
He's a victim.
He's a victim.
He's one of the
He's a
victims.
victim, you know. So I don't like to jump to conclusions, and simply because of very primitive fact about the perpetrators. They are not naive to take passports while they are going to commit attacks. I mean, unless they would like to somebody else to be blamed for the process itself, for the bloody attack. So normally, when the perpetrators go without any identification, if they carry identification with them, it means simply that they would like the blame of the attack to be
on them.
you know, forwarded to somebody else, not to them.
Dr. Ibrahim, I wanted to ask you another question. Now Daesh has claimed responsibility. Do you believe that this will lead to further crackdown on Syria and Iraq by the US-led coalition, for instance?
I believe that the involvement, the potential involvement of Daesh in this process, in this bloody attacks in Paris, will definitely lead the coalition to change their strategy in Syria and in Iraq. Not only in Syria and Iraq, by the way, in the whole world, especially the sizzling spots in the Middle East. Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Syria.
The hotbeds for the...
Yeah, it's because it's normal that they now understand practically after this barbarian attack in Paris that those people are not amateurs, they are professionals. How did they manage to get into Paris? And how did they manage to get this big amount of ammunition and rifles, attack rifles, and suicidal vests, and the organizational skills that managed to link all these teams together with these different members of them, and how they managed to make all of this organizational and planning process in a totally secret way, hidden manner, and managed to do it in one of the most stable and secured communities in the world.
Around the world, right?
This is all messages that they, well, I'm not quite sure that ISIS is responsible, but let us say if ISIS is responsible or not, that wouldn't change.
But do you think ISIS alone can plan such a big attack, seven attacks, simultaneous attacks,
well,
almost during the same minute?
I always have the opinion about ISIS that its existence and its entity have been magnified a lot, and they are not alone. Who is behind them? Nobody knows so far, but definitely there are some people behind them.
But it looks like governments works, intelligence works.
Well, it looks so because of the high level of organizational steps
Planning
that have been taken in this attack. It doesn't reveal that this is just a terrorism group. This is a highly organized and highly sophisticated and well established entity behind it. Of course, also very rich, very
the type of weapons and
very resourceful, and know the details of the very advanced and developed places like Paris and other countries in the world. And probably also this is a message to London and to New York and to other, to Berlin and to other, big countries,
Western
big countries,
that
you are not away from our reach. We can arrive to where you are, and we can do whatever we want. Whether this is ISIS or not ISIS, the message is clear to the international community and to the Western world specifically that we have to collaborate. They have to cooperate with Egypt. They have to cooperate with any other country which are seeking security and stability. Because terrorism, if they hit today in Cairo or in Sharm el-Sheikh or in Hurghada, they will hit tomorrow in Sousa in Tunisia, or Bordeaux in Tunisia, and day after tomorrow in Paris, and day after tomorrow in London. So there is no spot in the world away from their reach.
President Sisi have called several times on uniting the front against terrorism around the world, but we haven't seen any positive, real response.
That's a sad fact, I have to say, that usually most of the Western countries, they wait long time until they start to respond seriously, to give positive feedback about cooperation in terms of terrorism. And it's sad also that they wait until the fire attack them and fire their faces. They start to feel the heat, eating their communities. And they shouldn't wait until this happens, because we have to understand that it's not easy to undermine terrorism phenomena. It's a long process. It takes a long time of planning. It takes handling of the root causes of terrorism itself. It takes a lot of coordination process between different countries in the world. It takes a very deep intelligence operations between different intelligence agencies around the globe. It takes also a necessary culture from the normal people on the street themselves, how to safeguard their communities and how to be active in the process of confronting terrorism. So you're not talking about a thing that you can do over a day or two. You take about a process that could take years and years. And the earlier you start, the better that you can confront with less casualties, less victims, and less loss, and more likelihood to succeed and to bring about tangible positive changes. You talk about the whole world industries being collapsed or affected badly by this process. It's not only tourism, by the way. It's an industry, it's cultural life, it's social ties between different communities. All of that will be affected. You are not
But it's very difficult to avoid terrorist acts because it's usually very unexpected.
Well, that's why we have to cooperate. The cooperation is because of what you just said. You are not dealing with a materialized process that you can
clear enemy. You don't have a clear enemy.
You don't have a clear enemy. You don't have a conventional army that you can face and you can conquer. You have a hidden phenomena. You see only symptoms, but you don't see the realities. That's why it's a must that we need to cooperate. Cooperation will make a lot of things at the very same time. Cooperation will make any piece of information in a particular spot in the world available to other countries.
Any other country.
And probably this piece of information wouldn't help me in Egypt, but definitely will help other countries.
Speaking about Egypt, we had witnessed similar crises, and when we took reaction, for instance, when we issued the anti-terrorism law, it was criticized and condemned by some key players and international players. But also France, when this happened, François Hollande declared a state of emergency, closed the borders, security is beefed up, and we haven't seen any of those organizations criticizing Egypt for taking such precautionary procedures to speak up against what France did. How do you explain this?
You talk about this duplicity in handling what we have to accept as a national security issues. This, we can't joke about that. There is no joke about this. And it has to be taken for granted that, whenever there is an event that could be threatening seriously the stability of the country, there is no limits for the legal precautions that could be taken by the government. This is the full duty and commitment of the president, of the government, to protect and safeguard the community. And it might go to the largest possible reach of its capacities by using intelligence, by using security forces, by using even the army and different capabilities. If they don't use this in such critical situation, when else it can be used? I mean, it's not only this way, this time in Paris, it happened frequently in many other events in our recent history, when a particular country, even in the Western world, were under attack of terrorism. They immediately declare sort of emergency, and also they resort to the army to come to the civil life and start to spread its capacities to maintain public order. Mm-hmm. So this is a must, and let those who condemn keep condemning. But this is a fact that the priority for each government is to safeguard the community.
Yes, it's a matter of national security and the sovereignty
and sovereignty also, and also the existence of community. I wouldn't risk that for just to avoid condemnation or sort of criticism. Those who criticize.
Doctor, if you allow me, just we're being joined over the phone by Mr. Ilhami Zayed, and he's the head of the Egyptian tourism chamber. Sir, we can go back to our conversation as we're being told that he will join us on the line very soon. Back to what we were saying.
So we're talking about a very critical time of the history of any community where all the capacities, all the resources, especially the sovereign and rule of law agencies, have to be mobilized and utilized to protect the community. And if not, why the army is there, and if not, why security is there, and why intelligence is there. And if not used in a situation like what happened in Paris last night, this barbarian terrorism attacks, when else it can be used? And one of the most effective and successful outcomes of using armies in such situations is to send a message of tranquility to the civilians.
So if you just allow us to take this phone, we have with us Mr. Ilhami Zayed, head of the Tourism Chamber. Good morning, sir. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, sir, can you hear me?
Yes, but the voice is not very clear.
The voice is not very clear.
Yes.
So maybe we can get back to you, sir. Can you hear me this way?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me this way, sir?
I can hardly hear you. It's distorted.
We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
Sir, and back to our discussion, the French President François Hollande mentioned that France is threatened 1 week before the attacks. How do you see the timing of his statement, and the attacks happened shortly after that?
Well, that's sort of, bold, spread of the capabilities of terrorism activities. That there is a planning, and even they say that we target places. They have the gut to do this, and the countries, if they don't respond, seriously to these attacks or to these threats, they will lose a lot. We have to understand that, even with the casualties, the number of victims that have been killed yesterday in Paris, probably figures took around 160 victims.
There are different figures.
There are different figures, yeah.
We're not very sure about the number.
It's still the fact that if this happens in other places other than Paris, with its advanced techniques, advanced security forces, and advanced tools, the casualties, could have been much more, like hundreds and hundreds. You talk about an attack that hit the stadium, an attack that hit a concert hall that accommodated several hundreds of participants. You talk about attacks that hit some restaurants and streets, 7 attacks simultaneously, unison. So if this did not happen in Paris, and it happens elsewhere in other less equipped countries, you could
Dr. Ibrahim, if you allow us to bring in Mr. Ilhami to the conversation. Mr. Ilhami Zayed, the head of the Egyptian Tourism Chamber, can you hear me? Mr. Ilhami. Mr. Ilhami,
Yes,
do you have my voice?
Good morning.
Yes, good morning to you, sir. Mr. Ilhami, if you can shed more light on the latest in regards to the developments about the Russian plane and also its impact on the tourism industry, and also if you can tell us about the efforts of the Egyptian tourism chamber that you're heading in order to revitalize the tourism industry following the tragic Russian plane incident.
First, let me send over the phone my condolences for all these people, all these victims of this dreadful, tragic incident, and as well to our French friends. Until now, we have not advanced yet in the investigation concerning the crash of the airplane, and we cannot really advance any theory. All doors are open, and we cannot eliminate any possibility for the time being. We still have to wait and be patient until we get to know the facts.
Sir, do you have any further details or updates other than that the black box recording has been sent abroad to be examined with top-of-the-line technology that is not available in several countries? Do you have any further details?
The black box, it usually takes a long time to... People think it's an immediate action. Yes, it has been sent for examination, and it could be expected to last for a couple of months, if not 3 months. That's the black box, but there are other parts of the plane that have to be examined, and it takes it's a tedious and long process. And Egypt is not doing this investigation alone. There are people from France, Germany, because they are part of the builder of the aircraft, Ireland, because they were the first owner of the aircraft, and obviously Russians, because the aircraft was owned, operated, and had Russian guests on it.
Right, Mr. Ilhami, as we are starting the high tourism season in Egypt, do you think Egypt will be able to regain its status in tourism this season?
I'm sorry, the voice is not clear again.
Right, I will repeat my question. Do you think that Egypt will be able to regain its status in tourism this season, since we're starting the high season?
Oh, okay, I get your point. You're talking about seasonality now, about the number of tourists. Okay. As there is certainly a major drop in the number of tourists, especially if we take into consideration the number of Russian tourists that visit both Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh. Hurghada is more hit than Sharm el-Sheikh because the number of Russian tourists to Hurghada is by far superior, almost double the number of Russian visiting Sharm el-Sheikh. However, we do hope that within a short period, I don't say tomorrow, but within 1 or 2 months, it will be back, the movement will be back, for various reasons. And the first and most important is that Egypt is the only winter destination capable of handling this number of persons. Why? Because the prices are affordable, the distance is short, the sandy beaches, and the climate. Any other will not combine these 4 items. So, also we have to remember that the major tour operator, they lease the aircraft. They don't operate on case by case. I mean, they don't charter an aircraft for today and then tomorrow they take another aircraft. They have long-term commitment. And the aircraft is the major component of the trip. Should any time the aircraft be grounded, they have a problem as much as we have a problem. So it's a two-way street, and we do anticipate that with the pressure of the tour operator, the traffic will resume, hopefully sooner than we expect. We really hope that by the Christmas, the Eastern Christmas, which is the 7th of January, the Orthodox Church, traffic will be back.
Right, Mr. Ilhami Zayat, head of the Tourism Chamber, many thanks for your insight, sir. And back to our discussion, sir, and back to the French attacks. Why do you think France in specific was attacked several times this year?
There are recent reasons for France. For France, probably we know that last week Paris stated that they will start uniquely their attack against Daesh in Syria and Iraq, away from the coalition, and thus joining Russia in seriously targeting Daesh. So now we talk about two countries who are seriously attacking Daesh in Syria and in Iraq. Well, I'm saying seriously to shed the light on the very soft and prolonged tactics of the coalition to confront Daesh in both countries. They talk about years and years, so it means simply that they plan to be in the region for 5 or 10 years probably. It means that they don't have the decisive attitude to eliminate them. So France has taken its own position last week, telling that they will attack seriously. Seriously means that they will be, they will have their own targets, they have their own intelligence, and thus will be more or less joining Russia in their attitude in Syria. The other thing is also the confrontation that France managed to do in Mali against also extremism there. So France is very decisive and very serious in terms of confronting extremism. Of course, it's still so early to judge whether these attacks have been conducted by ISIS, but if so, the reason will be very much known to us. And why not attacking London? Why not attacking New York? This is still a question. Probably they ask themselves today whether they will get more ready those capitals get more ready to expect confrontations, to expect attacks. They have to reinforce their procedures to prevent any possible or potential attacks against them. And nobody knows which capital will be the next. That's why the message have to be clear enough. We have to be all serious, starting not from Egypt, starting from the superpowers. We have to be very serious that this is not a plaything. This is a serious threat to the whole world community, the whole humanity. We talk about a threat that is not linked only to a particular spot or small geographic area in the world. We talk like an epidemic disease that's spreading very quickly around the globe, and we have to be all together and fighting it.
Sir, do you believe that the precautions that the European countries will take as a reaction to what happened in Paris will have a negative consequence or will deteriorate the situation of the refugees?
Yes, I do. The answer is positive, yes. And I don't blame them, by the way. I mean, if they are targeted and they feel this threats increasing day after day and taking more and more serious scales, targeting their civilians and their own people and communities, I wouldn't blame them for enforcing more controls and more strict restrictive procedures to protect their own communities. And then also regret that this will mean more suffering to the refugees, and they already have enough package of suffering, but I mean, any country will be in the same spot will do the same. I wouldn't blame them, but I would blame them if they keep the level of coordination and cooperation in terms of confronting terrorism and security hazards the way it was. They have to be, largely or diametrically
A
changing.
major escalation has to take place against terrorism.
Of course. They have to review all the tactics of cooperation and confronting terrorism and human rights appreciation also. Because there is sort of mixture between human rights and extremism some way or another. They practice it in their own communities because their freedoms there are well settled, and their nationals are cultured enough to absorb some facts about freedom. They know that the religion is a personal choice, and no religious group and no church or mosque or synagogue or whatever or government has to do anything with their dogmatic beliefs or religious beliefs. But here we don't know that in the region yet. Still the religious cultures is so needs some change it.
Right, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawi, political analyst, many thanks for joining us today, sir. And before we wrap it up, of course, we would like once again to express our deepest condolences to the French people and the French government.
Dear viewers, thank you so much for being with us. By this, we